All right, this plant is sea oats. It's Chasmanthium latifolium. If you'll notice, the first part of that word starts with a CH, and it's not pronounced with a CH. It's pronounced like a K sound. Chasmanthium latifolium. A lot of common names, upland sea oats, things like that. It's, I guess, because of the way the seed heads look, kind of like oats. They're flat. They're really flat, and they're kind of on these little weepy droops that give them some character. This is in the Poaceae family, and lot of weeds are in the Poaceae family. This plant it's an ornamental grass. It will grow just about anywhere, but one thing it doesn't do is behave well. I'm gonna back up and pan out of this area around the college, and let's see if it's discernible. But if you can see out through here, there's quite a bit of it in this overgrown juniper bed. And what has happened is that these seed heads, over the years, as they weather and fall apart, they've just self-seeded and spread. This is not a really good clumping grass like other ornamental grasses that we use more often, like miscanthus or pennisetum or pampas grass, even any of those. But they do make really good dried grasses, but they don't make a really good landscape plant unless you had them in a container, or unless you had them in a meadow or somewhere where it didn't really matter if they kind of went wild. But this is Chasmanthium latifolium sea oats. This plant is Colocasia esculenta black magic. It's in the Araceae family. This is also known as elephant ears. Let me back up a minute. So this planting is about a good 4 feet tall or so. This is more than waist high on me. And it's called, let's see if I can find a bloom. Oh yeah. It's the Araceae family has these spadix type flowers. It's trying to produce fruit. I don't see any open flowers, but maybe you get the idea. Maybe I'll post a picture, but these are tropical plants pretty much. They thrive in wet conditions. They like their feet in wet soil and their heads in a lot of sun. They really need good warm soil to take off. So you may not see them emerging from the ground until, mid to late May sometimes, because the ground has to really get warm before they will emerge. But great plant for color, texture. I mean, the size of these leaves is pretty impressive, although there are several that get quite a bit bigger. And there's a lot of them with this black in their name. You see how some of these leaves have a darker green tint to them. I'm not exactly sure why some of them don't, some of them do. Sometimes it's a seasonal thing. You see in this little grouping of these offsets down here where some of them have darker leaves and some have lighter leaves. So it could be just a genetic thing. I have a brother and he didn't look exactly like me, but kind of similar. So sometimes people will dig the bulbs up. These have a large bulb that by the time you get plants this big, and I'm going to refer to this biggest one right here. I mean, I couldn't reach around that. It's quite large. By the time they get that big, the bulb is bigger than a softball. It's almost cantaloupe size, and they can be a little tender. So it used to be a common practice for people to dig up the bulb this time of year before a frost kills it back, and overwinter. Just cut off the foliage, overwinter the bulb in a dry, paper grocery sack in a dark corner of the garage and then plant them again next May. I don't know that people do that as much anymore. They just kind of let them do their own thing. These have certainly not been that well tended to. They've just been left to their own devices. And there's lots of little offset bulbs. So to me, I'm thinking they're pretty happy out here. But a lot of uses for this. You see this type of plant in real dramatic plantings at business entrances or subdivision entrances for the summer. But naturally, you know, that's going to go away soon because this is almost November. So anyway, Colocasia esculenta, Black Magic. And by the way, this is a huge group of plants. They're called aroids. Like I said, they're in the Araceae family. There are colocasias and then there are alocasias. And there's one way I remember is that alocasia's leaves point up like that. They are ascending. Alocasia with an A, ascending with an A. Colocasias are not, so these leaves point down. So that's how I tell the difference between colocasias and alocasias, but honestly, they're all elephant ears. This plant is called a jade plant. It's Crassula ovata, probably because the leaves are oval shaped. But this is a house plant in this area. And makes a good one. They take bright indirect light. They can take more light, but I'll show you one of those in a minute. But these are really durable, long-lasting house plants, and let me kind of get down a little bit lower. They kind of take on the character of like a bonsai tree to some extent. It's in the Crassulaceae family. Let me move over here real quick in our greenhouse and show you a flat of some of these that appear to be getting more sun. You see the red tinges on the leaves. That's an indication of getting a little bit more sun. It's perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, but in fact I kind of like it. But this is a good house plant. When you water them, allow them to get not really dry, but pretty dry between waterings. And when you water them very thoroughly. Make sure water is running out the bottom of the container. But good house plant. Now, these are kind of prone to getting mealybugs, and they've had them in here, but these look really clean. I'm real pleased that these are looking good. But always be on the watch for mealybugs, and that's a little bitty whitish oval shaped fuzzy looking insect pest that kind of gets nestled down in the leaf axils and underneath the leaves. But these look really good. But this is jade plant, Crassula ovata. All right, this little beauty here in the dark is Japanese holly fern, and this is actually a cultivar called Roquefortianum. It's Ceratomium falcatum Roquefortianum, and this is it's not a holly, but it is a fern, so it's a holly fern. And this particular cultivar is got a little bit finer leaves than the species. The species is simply Ceratomium falcatum, and the leaves, these are called pinnae. I always think of pinnae pasta, but it's basically Latin for feather. These pinnae on the species Japanese holly fern are much bigger and very coarse, so this whole frond would look much different on the species. So this is a cultivar that has a little bit more refined look. It's here in deep shade down in the shade garden at the college, and it does well. It likes well-drained soil. They don't like to be in soggy, wet soil during the winter. or they're prone to rotting. Up north, I mean, these will persist. These will persist well up into like zone 10, or zone 6 rather. Zone 10 is south of here. But much colder weather, but they will die down. They kind of become deciduous. But here in the south, especially where it's protected from the cold weather, here in the shade garden, it will stay evergreen. So very showy, nice looking, well-behaved fern. So that's Japanese holly fern, Ceratomium. Notice how I pronounce that C. It's not a K sound, it's an S sound. So Ceratomium falcatum roquefortianum. So this is an experiment in nighttime video. So things will look a little different under this camera light from my cell phone. So this is Dianthus Feuerhexe, and that translated from German is literally fire witch. So it's also called a cheddar pinks or just pinks, but this is kind of almost a grassy looking perennial. It's hard to tell in cell phone light, but well, it looks very blue. It's not quite as silvery looking in daylight. But boy, it really does reflect the silver now, doesn't it? So this is a perennial that prefers cool weather. It forms this really dense mat. It's a thick mat, and it actually can kind of work against it in really hot, humid weather. So it likes cool conditions. I'll pull the weeds out. It tends to slow down or even kind of die back in the heat of the summer. So if you can offer it some shade out of the direct afternoon sun, that's probably ideal. Good, well-drained soil, very persistent. And these are easily divided. You can see how these runners are going. You could easily make divisions and grow more. It's easily propagated. But there are 3 different colors here, and I'm going to put up photographs I took of this exact plot, actually from a different angle, but this one right here is actually the Feuerhexe. This is the cheddar pinks, and it's throwing off a few blooms. There's more coming up right there, which is kind of cool. And as the weather cools off, before it really gets into winter, these other colors will throw off some blooms as well. But the main bloom time is spring. These pictures that I took were taken in April, actually during the COVID shutdown. I was up here and they were blooming up a storm, so I just took some pictures. But you can see how the texture on this one is different. So they vary a little bit. That one's really short. That one's a little bit longer right there. So yeah, a little bit of variation. I mean, these are very closely related to the long-stemmed carnations that you get at the florist or get in a bouquet from Kroger, you know. The leaves are kind of waxy. They kind of like they repel water a little bit. And then again, the blooms are held just a few inches above the foliage, mostly in the spring. But this is Dianthus Feuerhexe, Firewitch.